Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. And Philippe, you've come in costume for people who are watching the video. If you're not watching the video, he is wearing an Indianapolis Racers.
Hey, how dare you?
No, it is an Edmonton Oilers jersey.
That's right.
I'm guessing this is because you're very excited about the start of the NHL playoffs on tomorrow. So that's
you mean the finals? Yes,
yes,
absolutely. Yes, I would very much like to see Connor McDavid lift the Stanley Cup. It's going to be tough though because Florida is very strong, but people are not here to hear my hockey takes. But yes, I'm cheering for the Oilers. So go Oil.
Well, it is the numbers, so give me the number. Who wins and in how many games?
Yeah. If I had to bet, I would probably say like Florida in 6, but I'll go with my heart and say Edmonton in 7, overtime goal by McDavid. There you go.
Wow. Okay, one for the ages. I'll take the same thing just for fun.
All right.
I'm also looking forward to it, so we'll see what happens.
I'm also hoping for not a by-election on the night of Game 7. That would be nice too, so we can watch the game. And
I think we're safe. It's not too far into the future. So, also, I have to mark today is my mother's birthday.
Oh.
And so I wanted to say happy birthday to my wonderful mother, who is, I assume, going to watch this. I think that's the only people who do. So.
Happy birthday! That is strange because my mother's birthday was yesterday. So two Geminis. All right. Well, happy birthday to both our mothers. And now that we love 50% of our audience, let's talk about the numbers.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about a couple polls. The first one we're going to talk about is going to be this poll we got from Pollara. Now, this was a Premier's approval rating poll. And it was not only, as we often see, about how Canadians view their own premier, but also how they view other premiers. And I thought this was what was really fascinating about this poll. Some of the big takeaways. There's only 3 premiers that are very well known. There's Doug Ford, who is by far the most known premier in the country. And then the only others who had roughly half of the country know who they were, Danielle Smith, and François Legault of Quebec. What did you think of these numbers?
Well, it kind of helps that all 3 premiers have been there for a while. Now, naturally, Danielle Smith became premier in 2022, but she has been in politics forever before going back to radio. And also, it's 3 of the 4 largest, province population-wise. And Doug Ford really made himself known since Donald Trump started attacking Canada with his tariffs, and he became like Captain Canada, and he paraded around with his cap, baseball cap. Canada's not for sale. I think that really helped elevate his profile. François Legault, 44% of Canadians say they are familiar with him. That's okay. So Quebec population is 23%. Okay, that's fair. He's not very well known, but he's been Premier of Quebec since 2018 and very polarizing too. So I would say that's the big overview. And Wab Kinew, still new, but 24% of Canadians are familiar with him. What is the population of Manitoba? It's about 6% of the country. Yeah. So that's significant. What about you, Eric? What did you see in those top line numbers?
Aside from just the recognition of the top 3 premiers, as you mentioned, one's from the biggest provinces. That Doug Ford is also just someone who people know from his time being the brother of Rob Ford and as you said, being a very present premier over the last little while. For Danielle Smith, I think to crack the top 3 is interesting, considering that Alberta, as you said, it is a big province, but it's not that big. So she is getting her name well known. But then pretty much everybody else, they're well known within their province. And then, it's often like 15 to 25% that people know them outside of the province. And they generally do better when it's their next door province, except for John Hogan, the new premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. Seems to be very well known in British Columbia because people are probably mistaking him for former premier and sadly a late premier, John Horgan, who is a different person entirely. But it was interesting to me, the Doug Ford numbers, because Pollara went a step further and said, what are your views of these premiers? Now, as you said, a lot of them aren't very well known, so it's hard to really know what to make of it. But the Doug Ford numbers for his favorable ratings across the country were surprising. 47% of Canadians said they had a favorable opinion of Doug Ford, and 27% had an unfavorable opinion. That's a plus 19, plus 20. I guess it depends on the rounding that from what Pollara was putting out. But those are pretty good numbers for a national figure. I mean, that's about as good as Mark Carney has right now, and Pierre Poilievre would love to have numbers like that.
Oh my God! I mean, Pierre Poilievre is lucky when he has an even rating, right? So, so you say plus 19, plus 20 across the country, plus 12 in Ontario is also a big improvement in of recent years. But that means that Monsieur Ford is even more popular outside of Ontario than he is inside of Ontario. So yeah, very interesting figures. But this is I don't want to cast shadow on these numbers. But there's recency bias in there, of course, because of everything that happened and because of the way that Mr. Ford has again represented himself as the defender of Canadian values. While there was no prime minister sitting in Ottawa, basically. Very interesting. I also see that Wab Kinew, we said that 76% of Canadians say they are not familiar with him, but among those who are familiar with him, he has a plus 15, so also very good. Wab Kinew, 66% positive impressions in Manitoba, 15% negative. What did the PCs get in the last Manitoba election? Like 40% of the vote?
Yeah, they still got like 40%,
Yeah, so that means there's a wide consensus right now that maybe you don't love the guy, but at least you appreciate Monsieur Kinew, his job as premier, and he's coming on soon will be 2 years in power. So that's a very long honeymoon by any stretch. Oh, and by the way, small correction. Manitoba is not 6% of the population. It's Manitoba and Saskatchewan together that are 6% of the population. Just so.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that's only around like 3 or 4.
Apologies.
Kinew's numbers are really good. They're still by far the best, and after 2 years, that's interesting. The next person on the list was Susan Holt in New Brunswick. It had a 61% favorable to 18% unfavorable, so she is also in the midst of a honeymoon, though that is a more recent one, so we'll see how long that's going to last. And the other ones who had majority positive ratings within their province were Tim Houston in Nova Scotia, David Eby in British Columbia, which was a bit surprising, Doug Ford, 50-38, and then for the other ones, John Hogan in Newfoundland and Labrador was 48-6. So there's still not a lot of people who have a bad opinion of him, but he just got in. Although there is going to be an election in a couple months, so that bodes well. And then near the bottom of the list, you had Scott Moe, who was only a plus 6, 47 favorable to 41 unfavorable in Saskatchewan. Danielle Smith was minus 5, 41 to 46, and François Legault was minus 10, 37 to 47. Overall, these are pretty good numbers for the premiers. Even for François Legault to be at minus 10, it would be a good result for him based on what we've seen in other polls.
Oh my God! When Léger asked the satisfaction numbers on François Legault's government for the past year, it's in the minus 30 range. So if the question is more like, how do you feel about not their government but themselves, these people? Legault performs better, but it's still a minus 10, and Legault is in last place in there. He's the next one in line for an election outside of Newfoundland and Labrador, as you said. Do the numbers in Alberta surprise you? 41% positive, 46% negative. What do you make of these numbers for Ms. Smith?
I think that they do seem to line up with some other numbers. We're going to talk about that Janet Brown opinion research poll in Alberta, which has some similar kind of numbers for Danielle Smith. I do think that we've seen for a while that her numbers are pretty polarized, that she has about roughly even to approval to disapproval, depending on the poll. But these are some of the weaker numbers we've seen, I think, for her in a little while, right? 41% for the UCP would not be a good result.
No.
So I think that might suggest that she does have to make sure that she's not going to be alienating more Albertans. And I think the independence issue is a risk there for her.
Yeah.
And in her national numbers, they were even worse, right? Yeah. She had 19% positive to 29% negative. So she was a minus 10 among all Canadians.
Lowest.
So she's not particularly well liked outside of Alberta. And in Alberta, it's a little bit on the negative side.
Reminds me of, it's been a long time and the posters and the questions were different, but obviously when you have a rising or brewing separatist element in your province, the leader that is perceived to be charging this separatist movement is not going to be well perceived outside of the country, right? I know it's not the same as we saw with Jacques Parizeau in the 90s and Lucien Bouchard, but obviously right now Danielle Smith in other places in the country, outside of the very hardcore conservative base, is not perceived positively, and those numbers confirm it. But she should. Should they care about this? Should the premiers care about how other places in the country perceive them? Because that's what I thought about when I saw those numbers. They're very interesting. They give us lots of content to discuss, but what do we do with this information? Like, what do we care that what Quebecers or Ontarians think about Web Canoe? I'm not sure. It's interesting.
Well, it has an impact on these kinds of national meetings that we've had, with the First Minister's meeting taking place, in terms of how willing their own voters might be to see their leader cooperate or maybe go to war with one of those other premiers, right? So I think it has some relevance there. But also, what about this? Future Conservative leader Doug Ford.
It's going to come up again, right? It is.
Well, with these numbers, I mean, he's got to be one of the most popular conservatives in the country.
He would have to be. Yeah, absolutely. He is. Who else? Who else in a conservative family in Canada would have better numbers than him? The thing is, Doug Ford had negative numbers for so long. He didn't have a honeymoon. Shortly after his election in 2018, his favorables were already down. They got up a little bit during the pandemic, like most premiers and the prime minister. But so I think I'm still a little numb or shaken by this to see, Doug Ford has a plus 12 in Ontario. That's new. But it hasn't been new in a few months now. But it feels still very much new. And Doug Ford said he would take French lessons. I'm not sure. Perhaps, but he should check on that, right?
Yeah, he should maybe brush up on his French.
Let's not start any rumor, but you're correct, though. These numbers would make some people think. The fact that Doug Ford won so easily in the provincial election, the province where federally the Conservatives did better, but this is where they need to do even better to win a majority government federally. So, yeah.
All right, let's talk about Alberta.
Yeah.
The Janet Brown poll that was commissioned by the CBC. Janet Brown has a very good track record in Alberta.
Oh, yes, she does.
I think she's been one of the few pollsters who's figured out how to reach some of those voters outside of Calgary and Edmonton that in other polls seem to be missed. So those national or those province-wide numbers tend to be pretty good. Should we start with the horse race, the personal numbers, or the sovereignty numbers? You get to choose.
Let's get the horse race out of the way. I don't think there's much surprises in there, except maybe for the regional numbers. Now, the whole poll is 1,200 Albertans, and so that's reasonably sized poll, right? And the regional numbers, the sample size, are also quite reasonable. So province-wide in Alberta, UCP 52%, which is roughly what the party had in the previous election in 2023. The NDP at 38%. Now that's 6 points fewer than in that election. And there's always that problem among the others get 10%, including 3% for the Alberta Liberal Party, which we know is, what would you qualify it? Moribund? Would that be fair?
Moribund might be the polite way to say it. It's a party that exists on paper, I imagine.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it had 3%. And there was also, I think, 4% for unspecified.
Yeah.
Which I guess we could interpret as being sort of an other party that's not listed among those that were in the poll.
Yeah.
You said there's not too many surprises. I mean, it is a 14-point lead for the UCP.
Yeah.
And there's increasing kind of chatter that the next election in Alberta won't be in 2027, but could be in 2026, tied to a referendum on something like, I don't know, independence. So, these numbers might be a lot more relevant than we would think because the election might not be 2 years away. It could be a year or a little bit more than a year away, or even less than that. So some of the numbers here, there wasn't, so Calgary was 52-39 for the UCP, so that's a pretty good 13-point lead. They only won Calgary by 4 points last time, so that is a big jump. And the NDP was ahead by 3 points in Edmonton, and in the last election they won it by 17.
Yeah,
so that is a pretty big swing. Maybe it depends on how much of the Edmonton donut is included in these numbers, but that could be rough for the NDP. They're not really in a position to win this election if there is an election in the short term.
Absolutely, but the Edmonton donut is like 150,000 people. I mean, it's not that. It shouldn't sway the numbers by 10 points.
Yeah, right. A couple points at most. Yeah,
absolutely. So right now, I updated my Alberta projection using these numbers. I mean, these numbers are mostly in line with what we had seen earlier in the year. Main Street Research had a poll. It's funny that Leger poll did not have the horse race in there. But so that would be a massive majority for the UCP. That would be kind of close to what Jason Kenney won in 2019. I do not see the NDP winning any seats outside of the cities except Lethbridge West and maybe Banff, Kananaskis. But we talked about in 2023, the recipe for the NDP was to sweep Edmonton and at least win half of Calgary or more than half than Calgary. None of these conditions are happening right now. You don't sweep Edmonton if you lead by 3.
No. I just did a simple swing on that. I think it would only deliver 28 seats to the NDP. Wow. So that's far from winning an election.
What did I have? Let me check. You said 28? 26. Yeah, I had 61 for the UCP and 26 for the NDP. So yeah, we're close.
Yeah, it does seem like Nenshi is not really breaking through. So Janet Brown you had to choose whether you're impressed or not impressed with the leaders on a scale of 0 to 10. And when she broke it down sort of by quadrants.
That's a good idea. Yeah,
27% had, I think it was 10 to 7 or whatever it was, for Nenshi saying that they were impressed, and 40% were on the lower end of that. So if we took it as that being impressed versus not impressed, and then people in between were in the middle, it's 27-40 for Nenshi. For Smith, it was 40-41. So we see that similar kind of very even split that we kind of had in the Pollara poll for Smith. But for Nenshi, he's kind of underwater. And even in Calgary, where he was the mayor, he was minus 14. So I'm not sure if he's actually helping the NDP at this stage.
Oh, well, we know that he's not right now. I mean, it could change once he gets in the House. We'll talk about that in a minute. But so far, his net contribution has been to lose support and not break any support away from the UCP. Now, as you said earlier, I mean, the election is supposed to be in October 2027. I feel also that it could be early, but you said the 2026? Yeah. Right? Like basically next year, right? After the municipal elections? Okay. That would be...
or tied to them or earlier than that, or I don't know. If they end up having a referendum in May, maybe you tack on an election onto that. Wow. I don't know. So if that referendum does go ahead, it doesn't seem like it's a winning proposition, right? What were the numbers in this poll?
So it was very interesting. So the question, again, the wording of the question matters. If a referendum were held today on whether Alberta should separate from the rest of Canada, would you vote for or against separation? Now, province-wide, 67% against, 28% for. So that's a plus 39 against separation. So not even close, right? Mm-hmm. This is like 28% is still a big chunk of the population, let's be fair. But it's not even close to being competitive.
And in Quebec, that would be seen as a low result.
Oh, that would be seen as a disastrous result for the sovereignty movement. Because in Quebec, we saw support for sovereignty in the high 20s this winter. We saw it 29. But against separation was never in the high 60s. It was like in the high 50s, and then you have a lot of undecideds that, they can swing everywhere. Only 5% undecided in this poll. In Calgary, in Edmonton, over 70% against separation. Rest of Alberta, 57 against, 35 for. And then I think the most interesting part was when you break it down by party support. Now, obviously, as we said, in Alberta, effectively, there's only 2 parties. I know the Greens had 1% of the vote, and the Alberta Party also had, I think, 1% of the vote. So, but right now they're not relevant. Among UCP voters, 54% for separation, 39% against. So among Conservatives in Alberta, that's a plus 15 in favor of separation. And among NDPers, so again, close to 40% of the population, that's 98% against and 2% for. Now, Eric, let me ask you this before I get you to comment on these numbers. What question could you ask Canadians, or in this case, Albertans, that you would get a 98% against and 2% for? Like, even, do you like puppies, or do you like chocolate cake? I mean, I cannot think of a question that you could ask that you would get a 98 to 2 ratio.
Yeah, that is a remarkable split. And I'd be curious to know who the two are, I guess.
Noise.
But that usually, if you ask any random question, you'll usually get 5 or 10% of people are going to be contrarian anyway. And in this case, among New Democrats in Alberta, 2% to 98. That is pretty. And there's no undecideds either.
No.
There are some undecideds among the UCP.
Yeah.
But what does that mean for Danielle Smith if a majority of her party, and at the very least a plurality, if we're taking into account the margin of error, would support sovereignty? Does this make the UCP a sovereignist party?
It makes the UCP what we always thought it was. It's a coalition. It's a coalition that works because they wanted to win and never let the NDP govern again, right? And I don't have to tell you this, and I'm sure our listeners know this, the Wild Rose and the PCs, when they were two separate parties, did not see eye to eye on many things, right? They were both conservatives, but different flavors of conservatives, and they did not like each other very much. Jason Kenney managed to unite everybody because they didn't want the socialists to run the province, and he was successful. But now that you see this, if Danielle Smith decides to go hardline, says no, this is ridiculous, we won't go that route. We have to have fight for our place in the Confederation, but separation or referendum is out of the question. Her party would probably fracture. There's going to be a UCP convention before the election. They would rise up. So that's why she has to give them some leeway, some rope. It's just I'm not sure if it's good politics. Outside of internal politics.
That's what the issue I see here at this stage, right? Because we've already heard her say that she needed to do something here to prevent a kind of rift within her party. But if it gets to a referendum, she has to choose a side. She could choose no side, I suppose, but that's going to please nobody. That would be awful. If she has to choose a side, a whole chunk of her party is not going to be happy with that. So what does that chunk of the party do? Does it go over to the NDP? Does it need to have another party start up? It just feels like the smarter way to do this would have been to very, very kind of limited I hear you on this, but not to open up this Pandora's box in this way. It does not feel like this has a good outcome for the UCP or Danielle Smith. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the province is conservative enough that they can kind of weather that storm. They can lose 10 points to a Republican party and still end up winning an election. Yeah. But it just feels like there's doors in front of her, and all of them are kind of bad. There's just which one's the least bad, and I'm not sure which one that is, and I'm not sure if she's going to choose it.
Yeah, I hear you. Here's where I would push back, Eric, however. Do you remember, I think it was October and November, last fall, like an eternity ago, my friend, when so innocent, we didn't know what was going to happen. We were talking about how Pierre Poilievre had bad personal numbers, and he was perceived as toxic from many Canadians. But at some point, you and I basically said, we criticize the Conservatives and Mr. Poilievre on their strategies, but they're leading by 25 points. So They must be doing something right. And I go back to this and I says, well, Madam Smith would win an election in a landslide right now if it happened. So she must be doing something right. But then the example of Poilievre falls down because he did lose the election in the end. It's just that could Monsieur Nenshi and that NDP brand in Alberta really get 50% of the vote in a general election? Because that's what they would need. Well, maybe not 50, but close to 50 at least. like there's no question in my mind that Danielle Smith would win an election if she called a snap election. It's just that new separatist party. What did you say it was called? The Republican Party. Mm-hmm. Like if they take 10%, okay, fine. If they take 20, now it's a problem. But it takes organization, it takes resources and money and volunteers and people to knock on doors. It takes a lot to build a party from scratch. So that's why, if I had to put an over-under on the Republicans in a general election, 5%, even though they seem to be more motivated than that, I don't know. Do you see the upstart Republicans as a threat for the UCP?
Not yet. I'm just wondering where it's going to go. Because right now, if you are a supporter of sovereignty in Alberta or independence, you can kind of stay with the UCP because Danielle Smith, for everything she says, does not give the indication that she is super gung-ho on Canada and doesn't want Alberta to separate. Yeah. So for now, you can park your vote with the UCP, right? Because it's not getting in the way of a referendum. And technically, we've got, based on what Danielle Smith has said, you could imagine that she could end up supporting sovereignty if she found that the support of it was strong enough in the province. Because she said, what was the quote? It was something like, she'll let Albertans decide what role she takes, or something like that, something to that extent, right? So, but what if she does have to take a position? What if those Republicans do okay in some polls? I don't know. It becomes a different thing. We are going to get a test of it soon.
Yep.
There's going to be three by-elections taking place on June 23rd in Alberta. Two of them are in Edmonton Strathcona to replace Rachel Notley, and Nenshi is running there. Edmonton Ellerslie is where Rod Loyola had resigned to run for the Liberals before the Liberals dumped him. So that's unfortunate for him, but that is going to be another seat up for grabs. And then the one that is probably the most interesting, even though normally it wouldn't be, in Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills, where the UCP is defending that seat, but that is kind of the heartland of Alberta separatism. So what are you looking for in these three by-elections on June 23rd?
So the UCP had 75% of the vote. So basically, it had
in Olds, Didsbury,
in Didsbury, so it had 23 points more than the UCP did provincially. This is basically what I'm looking at, the benchmark. I mean, you would expect the United Conservatives to win that easily, but will this Republican Party get 5% or 18%? I think the narrative that will follow will be dramatically different if this separatist party does well. If the Republicans get 4%. Perhaps we don't talk about it for a while. Now, those polls will continue because it's good. It's a good story. And then I know that when we have a poll in Quebec, I see the traffic and the attention that it gets when we talk about sovereignty. Even though it's not a top story in the mind of many people, numbers of sovereignty are always interesting, and so pollsters will keep asking these questions. But if the Republicans really tank in that riding, perhaps it's a movement that does a lot of noise, but is not entirely serious.
Their number is the most interesting one. So Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills is a rural riding, kind of in between Edmonton and Calgary. In the last election, the Independence Party of Alberta, which did not do very well anywhere, got 5% of the vote in this riding. So that almost is a benchmark that the Republicans should at least get 5%. When no one was talking about it, this party was able to get 5%. But I said this was the heartland of Alberta separatism. It's because this is the only area of the province, and actually all of Western Canada, where a Western Canadian separatist candidate has won an election. And there was a by-election in 1982, provincial by-election, and the Western Canada concept, which then wanted all four provinces in Western Canada to become their own country, won a by-election in 1982 in the riding of Olds, Didsbury. So it didn't include the Three Hills part, but the Olds, Didsbury part was won in a by-election. A general election was held later that year, and the PCs were able to take the seat back. But in that election, 1982, when it was a provincial election, the Western Canada concept got 25% of the vote in Olds, Didsbury and 17% in next door Three Hills. Wow. So you see that there is this base. Now, that base is 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But you know what? A lot of the voters that are in that riding probably, some of them voted in 1982. So I'm very curious to see what their score is going to be. And whether it starts with a 1 or a 2, as long as it doesn't end right there, will make a big difference, I think, for that movement, the Republicans. And they have candidates in Edmonton, Ellerslie, and Strathcona, but I doubt they'll do very well there.
Do you know the story of these by-elections? I mean, was it a reaction to the Queen coming to sign the new constitution? Was it? Do you know? Because I mean, I read about this, especially in recent weeks when that came back up in the news. But I'm not sure I know the context of this by-election win by the WCC. Do you?
Well, I mean, it
Not
was
that
in
I
the
want to
context
embarrass you.
It was in the context of the National Energy Program.
And
all of the disputes between Pierre Trudeau's government and Western Canada. And the 82 provincial election that was held not long after the by-election, it was still Peter Naheed who was the premier at that time. He ran kind of against separatism, about how the country Alberta has to be united and not try to leave Canada, but be strong to stand up to Pierre Trudeau and the government. And so that's why they were able to win the general election a few months later. But it was part of that larger conversation at the time. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Edmonton Ellerslie would be the other one to be because the NDP won it with 62%. It used to be at 37%. That's a gap of, 25 points. The swing in the Janet Brown poll suggests it's more of a 14-point swing in Edmonton, so that might be out of reach. But I don't think they can take it for granted that they could win it. So I'd keep an eye on that one to see if the NDP can hold on to it. And if they lose that, there's no path for government. You can't lose. No. The NDP cannot lose a seat in Edmonton and hope to form a government at this stage. So,
I mean, it cannot. I mean, it would not even be close. Should they lose a seat like this? I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but they would win like 15 seats over the whole province. They would get shut out of Calgary almost. So, no. So it's a test for the NDP. It's like an easy test, but you're supposed to win those easily. We'll see if you don't. But what would you guess the share of the vote in Strathcona will be for the NDP? Because Rachel Notley, very popular, former premier, then former premier. I mean, I doubt Mr. Nenshi gets 80.
Yeah.
But could he get 70?
I think if he gets below 70, that would be a problem. Above 70 is fine. By-elections are by-elections. It's a pretty safe riding, so people might not go out to vote. But if we see that he's at like 65 or something, yeah, sure, that's an amazing result if you get 65% of the vote anywhere. But this is the safest NDP riding in Alberta, and federally, it's the safest NDP riding in the country.
Right.
It's not the exact same riding, but it covers some of the same area. Yeah. He's got to show up. He's got to win Ellerslie. He's got to put up over 70 in Strathcona, and then for Danielle Smith, I would just worry about what that Republican number is in Old Stotesbury, Three Hills. That's the storyline, I think, for those three by-elections.
Oh, I see the date has been set. I thought it was late June 23rd. I like it. So Game 7, if there is a Game 7, is on June 20th.
There you go.
I knew because I checked the ticket prices. I figured, if I go to Alberta to see, and then I would have to take a mortgage to have a ticket. So
we'll need some more Patreon subscribers before we go to a hockey game. Okay, I think you have a quiz, and it is not a quiz of your own making.
Well, half the quiz is of my own making. So last night, it was in Ottawa. I was at Le Métropolitain for the Politico Trivia Night. Politico Canada, the playbook. Nick Taylor-Vasey, my friend, and he's the chef de bureau of the Politico, basically organizes these events. They're just meetups and then questions random about prime ministers and results. And they asked me to have a numbers-based section, and it's a lot of fun. So I
you
have
did come
10,
up with them. All right.
Yes, absolutely. So I have 10 trivia questions for you. The first 5 were written by Nick Taylor-Vasey, and I asked him permission. He was like, okay, cool, that's cool. And the 5 others were by me with numbers. But thing is, they're made for a general crowd that is very much in the Ottawa bubble. Okay. But you should crush this, I think. But we'll see. No pressure, Eric, but you should crush this.
All right, we'll see.
Okay, let's go. The first half is about prime ministers. Are you ready, my friend?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay. Number 1. True or false? Justin Trudeau was the 24th Prime Minister of Canada.
Oh, jeez. That sounds right, but I'm not sure. I don't know offhand. I'm going to say that's true.
Oh my God. It's false.
Oh, God.
Mark Carney is the 24th Prime Minister of Canada. Justin Trudeau was the 23rd.
Off by one.
Okay. All right. Okay.
If you wanted, I could have counted, but then that would have just been... Should have counted.
All right. It's fine. Number 2, Eric. In 1956, U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower offered the sitting Prime Minister at the time a round of golf at the famed Augusta National Course. Which Prime Minister was it?
That would be Louis Saint Laurent.
And it was Louis Saint Laurent. You are correct. The Liberal just before Mr. Diefenbaker. Number 3. So you're 1 for 2. Number 3. Lord Stanley of Stanley Cup fame left his post as Governor General in 1893. Who was Prime Minister at the time?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Okay, so John A. Macdonald died in 1891 or early 1892. I can't recall which, but he died very shortly after winning the election in 1891. And then it was John Abbott who came in for a very brief time. And then it was John Thompson, I think, from 92 to 94. So I guess it would be John Thompson.
John Sparrow David Thompson is the correct answer. I'll give it to you. So, did they
Thank you for giving me the correct... Yes.
Well, but did they call him John Sparrow or John David Thompson?
They called him John Thompson.
Okay, never. Sorry.
I think they called him Sparrow.
You are 2 for 3. Okay. Number 4, Eric. How many men served as Prime Minister before Wilfrid Laurier?
Oh, okay, before Laurier. I thought it was just going to be men in general because we had 24, so it'd be 23 or 24. How many? Okay, so there would be MacDonald, there was Mackenzie, there was, as I just said, Thompson, Abbott, and Bowell. And Tupper, so there'd be 6.
Ooh. Is that your final answer? Is that
Yes.
6?
Yeah, 6.
Yeah, Tupper was a short-lived, but he counts. So the answer is 6. You are correct. Oh, this was multiple choice, but you're better than that. You still got it.
Yeah.
So. All right, you're 3 of 4. Can you go for 4 of 5? How many prime ministers' surnames start with the letter M?
Surnames with M. Okay. Okay, well, there was MacDonald, there was Mackenzie.
That's 2.
There's MacDonald, Mackenzie, and then it was Abbott, Bowell, Thompson, and Tupper, Laurier, King. Laurier, Borden, Meehan. So that's 3. Then it was King, Bennett, King, Saint Laurent, Diefenbaker, Pearson, Trudeau, Clark, Trudeau, Mulrooney. There's 4. Then we got Campbell, we got Chrétien, we got Martin. That's 5. Harper, Trudeau, Carney. 5.
And the answer is 5. That's what he should have done with the prime ministers.
I know, that's what I should have done. I could have just counted them.
You got 4 of 5. Maybe I surprised you with that first one. So, all right.
I always hate that when people are like, oh, this is the 43rd Parliament, the 44th Parliament, and I always forget which one is what.
Yeah, well.
It's very important.
Okay. So this is my section.
Okay.
And it's just numbers from the past election, from the 2025 election. I already gave you a quiz about the 25 election, and you did really well. So let's see how you do in this. Number 1. In which province did the federal Liberals achieve their lowest share of the vote? Now, I'm excluding territories here, just provinces.
I believe that was Saskatchewan. They were in the 20s.
In Saskatchewan, they had 26.8%, which was lower than in Alberta, which had 28%. So Saskatchewan is the correct answer.
All right.
All right, very well. In number 2, in the riding of Toronto-Danforth, Liberal MP Julie Dabroussin, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, so I go phonetically. Julie Dabroussin was re-elected with 67% of the vote. Which party came in second place in Toronto?
Oh, in Toronto, Danforth. Did the NDP finish second there? I'm not sure if they actually did. But I'm going to say they did. NDP finished second.
It was Ashik Hussein of the Conservatives with 19%. But kind of a trick question. You kind of expected the NDP had, I think they had 13%. In Toronto Danforth, the NDP finished a distant third. I know.
Jack Layton's old riding.
Insane. Okay, so you're 1 for 2 here. Outside of Quebec, in which province did the Conservatives achieve their lowest share of the vote? Outside Quebec, excluding the territories, of course. Where did the Tories, or the Conservatives, do worse in terms of popular vote?
I think it was Atlantic Canada. And I can't recall which one it is now that I'm thinking about it. I think it might have been PEI.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah, it'll be my final.
I don't have the numbers here, but PEI was in the high 30s.
Okay.
Nova Scotia, 35.7. Nova Scotia, which interestingly 6 months prior had elected the PCs in a landslide, in a historic landslide. But the federal Conservatives did not do well in Nova Scotia.
Interesting.
Okay, you went for 3. Okay. In how many ridings? Number 4. In how many ridings did the NDP get at least 40% of the vote?
Oh, I think I remember looking at this. I think it was only 3.
The answer is 3. I'm giving you a bonus point here if you can name the 3.
It was Edmonton, Strathcona. It was Rosemont, La Petite Patrie, and the third one was.
So far,
it was Vancouver East.
And Vancouver East is good. I'm giving you 2 points for this. There you go. Beautiful. Right. Okay. So that's what? Bonus point. It means you're 3 out of 4. Okay. Last question. This is a multiple choice, but I'm not sure I'm going to... We'll see if you need it. Okay.
Okay.
Rounded to the nearest percentage point. What was the highest share of the vote from any party in any riding? Do you need a multiple choice?
No, I can. I know it's in the 80s. I think it was like 84. Was it?
Conservative MP Stephen Bunk, elected in a Saskatchewan riding of Souris, Moose Mountain, received 84% of the vote and the highest across the country. So the multiple choices were 80, 82, or 84, and the answer is 84. Wow. Okay, so you did 4. So you have 8 out of 10. You got 7 right answers, but you got a bonus point here. Congratulations. That's pretty good. I have more questions, but I'm going to keep it for another quiz. I think this is pretty good. Good job, my friend.
All right, we'll do number of the week. I'll go first. So mine is 19. So this is the amount of points between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre in the most recent Nanos research poll on preferred prime minister. So Carney has a 19-point lead. In voting intentions, the Liberals only had a lead of about 4 or 5 points. But in that poll, which is a rolling month-long poll, but now is entirely post-election, that's a big gap between Carney and Pierre Poilievre on preferred prime minister. So that does seem to be at least a personal little bit of honeymoon for Carney.
Yeah.
Even if the voting intentions haven't shifted all that much since April 28th.
And it aligns with what we've seen from other pollsters so far. Mr. Carney has succeeded his entry, at least, in politics so far. We'll see how long it lasts. My number is a bit different. It's 489. So, Eric, 489 days until the Quebec election.
Oh.
If we get there, the thing is...
Like as a society, or...
No. As a guy. Well, let's stay optimistic here. But there was chatter last year that, maybe Legault could go early. Maybe he could surprise his opponents. The numbers that we've seen from Léger, again from Pollara this week, the horse race, the personal numbers, the satisfaction, everything is negative right now for the CAQ. And so I really do think we're going to go the distance in this parliament in Quebec City. And I'm already gearing up. I'm already getting ready for that election. That's going to be a A lot of fun. If really is a 5-party race, because every province west of Ontario right now is a 2-party province, right? Let's be fair. I know the Greens have a seat here and there. And Ontario is 2.5, 3, right? But Quebec has 5 parties that will probably win seats. It's going to be extremely competitive and hell to project, but it's going to be fun as well. So.
And with, all of the discussions about national projects and national unity, what happens in the Quebec election is going to be important beyond what happens in Quebec. So we're going to be ramping up to that. That'll be it for this week. Thanks a lot to Philippe, and thanks to our listeners and watchers. And yes, go Oilers. If you'd like to join us at the Patreon, where you can get bonus episodes every 2 weeks or so, we have ad-free audio episodes, and you can join our Discord. You can go to thenumberspod.ca. You can also just join us on Apple Podcast subscription if you want to get the bonus episodes. We had a mailbag just this past week, and that was a lot of fun. So if you want to listen to that, you can go to thenumberspod.ca. So Philippe, we'll chat in a week. Absolutely. By then, we'll have a few games already in the books, so we'll see whether our predictions are going to be anywhere close to the mark. But let's hope. Let's hope. Finally, let's bring the cup back to Canada. Let's do it.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Talk to you next week.